everyone, and welcome back to my channel and to a new video. Today is the start of a new series, I guess, that I'm planning on doing for my channel, and I'm going to start recommending some graphic novels. I, for one, I wouldn't say like I'm a voracious graphic novel reader, like it's not all I read. I'm not like a super fan of specific things or anything like that, but I read kind of a lot. And so I want to recommend in parts some of the graphic novels that I really love, or some that I just think that everyone should read, or just some that you might enjoy. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'm only going to talk about 10 graphic novels today, / authors, and then I'll continue on again in a later video. I'm going to be separating these and maybe future versions of this video into children graphic novel, teen graphic novels, and adult graphic novels. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the children's graphic novels. So first up, I want to recommend one of my all-time favorite children's graphic novels, and that is The Tea Dragon Society, and this is by Katie O'Neill. I would recommend any of her books. I really like her art style and just her books in general. They're fantastic. This graphic novel series is about tea dragons, as the title would suggest, and tea dragons are exactly what they sound like. They're tea dragons. And they all have very specific personalities, and it's so fun, and I'll show you in the back. There's like an index of all the types of tea dragons, and they're so freaking adorable. So we've got, you know, like the Jasmine Tea Dragon. I think the Chamomile Tea Dragon might be my favorite because he's the cutest. Oh my god, the Hibiscus Tea Dragon, look at that face. They're just so freaking adorable, and I really like them for that reason. I also really like this graphic novel series, but her books in general, because of the diverse characters. Well, first of all, a lot of them aren't like human, but the characters have a variety of skin colors, and they have a variety of gender identification and sexual orientation, and it's just a diverse fantasy world that is completely expected to be diverse and is okay with it, and I love it for that. The first book in the series is about Greta, who comes across this character and her chamomile tea dragon, and I think they're kind of like on the run, and Greta is just such a good person and helps them, and then it's just about their community and their culture, and it's so sweet. Such a great graphic novel. I highly recommend for adults as well as children. And then the other graphic novel that I absolutely love, and by, again, another one of my favorite graphic novel artists, is Sheets by Brenna Thummler. Sheets is the first book, and Delicates is the second. I don't know if she plans on writing any more in this series, but I would totally be okay with that. These books follow Marjorie and Wendell. Marjorie is a teenager who in the first book is grieving for her mother's death, and Wendell is a ghost, specifically a sheet ghost, and his story in the beginning is kind of just coming to terms with being a ghost and how his life has forever changed, and while he's not living, he can still have fun and still be a good friend to Marjorie. And it's such a sweet graphic novel while still centering around such, you know, heavy themes such as grief and bullying. In the second book, there is more heavier topics, so definitely trigger warning for these books, as they can be a little bit heavy, but I also would say that they're great for children to read, to learn more and to just be aware of these types of things in different people's lives, and they're just so adorable, and the artwork, it's chef's kiss. It is so cute. She also did an Anne of Green Gables graphic novel adaptation, and again, like the art is just, I love it so much. So highly recommend Sheets specifically, but Brenna Thummler in general. And now I'll get into some teen, young adult graphic novels. First, I want to talk about Cheshire Crossing by Andy Weir. He's the same author who wrote The Martian, and this book is fantastic. It's such a short and sweet graphic novel. I don't know if there are going to be more in this series, but it's a standalone as it is now, and I really enjoy it. Now, I've noticed on Goodreads that this graphic novel is not actually that popular, which kind of just surprises me because I loved it so much. So this graphic novel is about Wendy, Alice, and Dorothy. So Wendy from Peter Pan, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. And similar to if you've read the Wayward Children series by Sean McGuire, these girls have come back from their adventures and everyone thinks they're crazy. And so they are sent to this kind of boarding school that's for like misbehaving girls. And what do you know? Things happen. They get sucked into each other's worlds and they have to fight the same villains. Specifically Captain Hook. He's, I would say, the main villain with the Wicked Witch of the West. And the way that it ends, it kind of suggests that maybe the Queen of Hearts is coming into play. But I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be a second book. But this is so fun. I really like the simplicity of the artwork and how it just like, it's just so well done for this graphic novel. And I highly recommend it. If you like the Wayward Children series, I mean, I don't actually like that series, okay? I thought this was a better Wayward Children's book. So, I mean, I guess it just depends on your preference. I thought this was really fun because the characters were quite different from what we know of them from their original stories. And I just really liked that. I liked how the characters were translated into not a modern world, because it's not a modern world, but more of a modern thinking than the original stories. So again, highly recommend that graphic novel. The next teen graphic novel that I absolutely adore is Mooncakes by Wendy Zhu and Suzanne Walker. This is so good. I would say this is currently my favorite graphic novel. I think I've read it 3 times now and I'm getting excited. I'm getting pumped to read it again this Halloween. This is a story that follows Nova, who is a witch, and then her friend Tam, who is a werewolf and is kind of on the run. And Nova comes across them when she has heard some rumors about this white wolf that's in the woods, and also there are these like some nefarious things that are going on in her community and in the woods specifically. So Nova goes to investigate and comes across Tam, and they rekindle their friendship and they're trying to get to the bottom of what's happening in the woods. This is a great story about like rekindling a friendship, a friends to lovers romance. It's got some great rep. It's so fun. This artwork is also like, I just love it so much. It's so good. And I just love the main characters so much. I also, little side note about myself, I love werewolves. They're like my favorite paranormal entity, being, creature. And then like witches are like my number 2. So like werewolf and witches, like this is just amazing. This is such a great story if you're looking for a diverse Halloween graphic novel that's just fun and also very emotional, and it's just such a great read. The next graphic novel that I absolutely loved, gave this one 5 stars, fantastic book, is Taproot by Keezy. This is I think you might find a common theme of like paranormal, fantasy, supernatural type graphic novels that I'm really into. This one follows Emil, who he's kind of a gardener, and his best friend Blue has recently died, and Blue is a ghost, but Emil can actually see ghosts, so it's not an issue, but it kind of is. Blue himself does not want to move on because he's in love with Emil and he wants to protect him, but he also he wants to have a relationship with him. And Emil, because of his ability to see ghosts, ghosts are attracted to him. So Blue is concerned that dangerous things will happen, as they are happening in their city. This was such like I think this really spoke to me because of the characters. Hamal is such like, he's such an introvert, such a, I don't want to say quiet in the way that people assume I mean quiet. I mean quiet as in like peaceful and calm and introverted, but not quiet, if you know what I mean. And I really just can relate to that type of character. And if you love plants, highly recommend. If you love supernatural books, if you love diverse romance, I highly recommend this. I mean, the romance isn't like a huge part of this book, but as the cover might suggest, it's definitely a part of it. So I highly recommend. This is such a beautiful graphic novel. The art was just so nice, and it was so sweet and heartwarming, but still fun, and such just a great graphic novel. And the last teen graphic novel that I want to recommend, again, another paranormal, supernatural type of graphic novel, is Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This is a great graphic novel that's separated into different stories, and they're so creepy, so some of them were a little scary. I'm not a huge fan of horror, but I will say that I just really loved this book. I loved the artwork. Again, if you don't know, like, if you're not a big graphic novel reader, I think if you become one, you'll really know what kind of artwork that just really is really powerful to you. And I really like this artwork because of the color scheme and the way that it really just pushes the story forward. And so this is a great graphic novel, and I really highly recommend it. If you love horror, this is fantastic for you. It's creepy. The color scheme is like red and black and white, and so like red with a lot of like blood and stuff. So definitely a great graphic novel for you horror fans. So I highly recommend it, but it's also just a really great graphic novel full of like graphic novel short stories, which is kind of different, and I love it. And now I'm going to try to get away from the whole paranormal, supernatural type of thing a little bit, but I'll be coming back to it. So the first book that I went to, well, the first series, adult graphic novel series that I'd like to recommend is March, and that's by John Lewis and the actual graphic novel artists and whatnot. And this is about John Lewis and his life, his early life, and the first book follows John Lewis in his young life, and also when he meets Martin Luther King Jr., and when there are these civil rights movements that are just beginning, or that he's just interacting with for the first time. It's got such a great ending where you could, if you wanted to, leave off there, but I couldn't. I had to finish the series, and it's fantastic. Again, this one, I just feel like the artwork just really pushes forward that story and the emotional impact that it has. So this one is such an important series, especially as John Lewis has recently passed away. I think this is such a great way to honor his legacy, to consume these books, because they're fantastic and they tell such an important part of American history. And also, if you don't love reading about history, graphic novels, fantastic way to read and learn more about it. Some more not paranormal, supernatural graphic novels that I really love is the books from the artist Lucy Knisely. She writes a lot of graphic memoirs. That's kind of her thing. I know recently she has started writing fiction graphic novels, but the first book that I read from her was Something New, and this is her memoir of her and her husband's wedding and them getting married. And it's so interesting because, not that I'm like against marriage per se, I guess I'm more like against specific traditions. And it was really interesting because this graphic novel, she goes into like the history behind certain traditions that shouldn't exist anymore, and I just thought it was so interesting, and I loved hearing about her wedding even though like I'm not a huge wedding person. So I thought it was so good. Her other graphic novel, she's written one about her journey with pregnancy and having her son, And I thought that one was really interesting as well. And I'm not a kids person. Like, I'm like mostly not a marriage person, but I'm 100% not a kids person. So for me to read this graphic novel is kind of crazy, but also like it's just very good. Her art style is fun, and I definitely recommend following her on Instagram if you like her art style, because she has this account called Condiment Raccoon, and it's hilarious, and I highly recommend it. But definitely check out her books. They're very informational. She does also have one about, I think, when she went to France. She has like a couple travel log ones, and then one from when, like, that's like a cookbook that's like a teen graphic novel that's kind of also a cookbook, and they're really fun, very informational, and just like you get just a great vibe of who she is, and it's just, it's fun. Sliding slowly back into the horror, paranormal, supernatural theme, we have My Favorite Thing is Monsters, Volume 1, by Emil Ferris, and this is a chunker of a graphic novel. It's a gigantic book. It took me a while to read, and I normally like get through graphic novels like in an hour, but like this book is like, it's like a full-length textbook size book, and the artwork again is very interesting. I love it because it's so different from other graphic novels that I've seen, and like you can tell like this book has it took this artist and this author a long time to make, and I'm pretty sure the second one hasn't even come out yet because whew. Oh, it's supposed to come out this year. Wonderful. So in time for its release date in September, try to make your way through the first book. It's about this girl who lives in an apartment building, and she's going around and trying to solve a mystery, and so she's like visiting different people who live in her apartment building, and it ends up being about this woman who lived in Nazi Germany. And so it's very interesting. So it's not like technically horror, but this girl who loves monsters thinks that she is a monster, and that kind of lends itself to how the story is being told. So it's very interesting. I definitely will say that this graphic novel is not for everyone. Like I said, it took me a while to get through, not just because like it's huge, but it's also like very deep subject matter, which graphic novels definitely can have that deep subject matter, but like that plus the length, it's gonna take you a while. But the illustrations again are just fantastic. I'm really excited to read the second one. Maybe this year, who knows. And then the last graphic novel series that I will talk about in this video is my absolute favorite graphic novel series right now. Like Mooncakes, favorite graphic novel standalone. My favorite, absolute favorite graphic novel series is Rat Queens. Let me tell you how much I love this book. You know, if you're a graphic novel reader, or if you're not, you may realize that like the books can be really short, and then you have to wait like a year in between like the next one coming out. And sometimes it's really annoying because like I feel like I have to reread with certain graphic novels, but I don't care with Rat Queens. I'll reread it over and over and over and over again because it's so good. Again, this goes back to the type of stories that I prefer. Definitely love fantasy. There's a lot of magic in this series. So basically, it's about this group of girls who are the Rat Queens. They are mercenaries, and that is their group name, team name, the Rat Queens. They're not actual rats, but that is their name, and I love it. When I first heard about this, I was like, that sounds weird and kind of dumb, and I don't want to read about rats that are queens. They're not actual rats, but they are queens, for sure. They are amazing. They are badass. They are this wonderful group of strong women who are just like mercenaries, so they're in it for the money, but they're also good people at the same time. Deep down, they're good people. And you learn a lot about each one of them and their different stories, and they're so different from each other. Basically, they all pretty much have magic, or they're fantastic at killing people. Sometimes both. There's a tiny bit of romance, and I love it so much. I love the stories, I love the adventure, I love how funny it is, how like crude it is. Honestly, this series is so fantastic. Everyone I've recommended it to loves it. So even if you're not if you're a fantasy lover for one, highly recommend. You should read this series. If you are trying to dip your toes into graphic novels and you like funny stuff, read this series. I will warn you that one of them gets a little bit confusing, but just push past it, okay? Every series has its downfalls. There are flaws in everything. We can't be perfect. But I still find this series absolutely perfect in my eyes. I love it so much. It's such a great, I don't want to call it, it's just like such a great book about women who are strong because they're women, and it's fantastic. And I highly recommend, please go read this series. At least read the first book. Just give it a shot. It's so good, and I highly, highly recommend it. And that'll be it for this for part 1 of this series of graphic novel recommendations. Like I said, I read a lot. I don't read like a ton, but I feel like I read enough that if you're looking for graphic novel recommendations, I've got you. So definitely, if you have any graphic novel recommendations, please put them in the description box. I'm always looking for some more good graphic novel recommendations because there is so much out there. I think for a lot of people, what's hard about reading graphic novels is that you don't know what's out there. I think a lot of people, when they think of graphic novels, they think of manga, and they think of like comic books like Batman and like the DC and the Marvel stuff. And I don't read those. They're just not my thing. I'm not super into like superhero stuff. So there is a lot out there that is not that. I do like manga, and I do not feel confident to give recommendations in manga at all, so I won't go that way. But definitely different graphic novels, whether that's fantasy graphic novels, contemporary, nonfiction, graphic novel memoirs. There's so much out there, and I'm excited to get into more of them next time. So don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out. And I'll see you in a new video soon. Bye!